everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Polyglot Perspective Podcast, hosted by me, Taylor.
And me, Lily. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the topic of intercultural communication.
But before we get started, as always, we would really appreciate it if you could take a few seconds to subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube channel, as well as leave us a great review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This would truly help us out a lot. Another reminder that all of these podcast episodes will be available on our website at polyglotperspective.com, so feel free to check it out. Thanks so much. And without further ado, please welcome our guest for episode 5 of season 2 on the Polyglot Perspective Podcast, Clara.
Hi.
Clara is a 20-year-old French young adult who studied abroad in Spain for 3 months. Clara is majoring in LEA.
Edouard.
And how do you pronounce that?
Langue étrangère appliquée, which in English is
Applied foreign languages.
Yeah.
Okay. And Clara loves studying languages, listening to music, reading books, and watching movies, and learning more about different cultures. Clara can speak French, native language, English, Spanish, Russian, and Korean.
So thank you so much for joining us today, Clara. Pleasure to meet you. And at the start of each episode, we have all the guests introduce themselves and the languages that they're currently learning at the moment. So please introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I start with French, with my mother language. So bonjour, je m'appelle Clara. In Spanish, hola, me llamo Clara. In Russian, привет or здравствуй. Я меня зовут Clara. And in Korean, 안녕하세요, 제 이름은 Clara입니다.
Nice. Okay.
And to get to the first segment, we're going to be asking you some personal questions. Whatever. Okay. Clara, can you tell us about the city where you live? Like some tourist attractions, food, and something special about your city?
Yeah, sure. So I live in Creil, which is 30 minutes next to Paris. There's not a lot of things to do in my city. Maybe you can go to the city around it. There's a lot of castle. There's a river, and the city around it are very, very rich. So you can find a lot of rich people. There's a golf club and a lot of things like that.
That's so cool. You have castles near your city? Can't relate. Yeah, it's so cool to see like how depending on where you live, like what country, and especially like what part of the country you live in, your like surroundings can be completely different. Like where I live, there are no castles nearby, and there's just like a bunch of buildings and towns. And yeah, how about you, Lily?
Well, around me, I don't know. It's just when you live somewhere, it feels so normal to you. So you don't really know, like,
Yeah.
But in New York, I guess we have like really tall buildings, like skyscrapers, and then like flashing billboards in some places. So that's the kind of stuff we have.
Yeah. I guess like more towards Los Angeles, you get like more beaches and, more like tropical stuff. But yeah, it really depends on where you live. I'd also like to ask you, are there any like misconceptions about French people or the French culture that the media portrays that you've seen so far?
The media, I don't know, but a lot of people and even Parisian think that Paris is the only city in France. Well, it's not the case. There's a lot of cities, and each region or city has their thing. So if you go to Bordeaux, there's a lot of wine. If you go in the south, there's beaches. If you go where I used to live, there's a lot of mountains, and you can ski. There's a lot of things to do.
That's really cool. And that's pretty similar to America too. I feel like a lot of people, when they think of the US, they think of like either California, like specifically Los Angeles, and they think like Los Angeles is the only part of California. And they like, because our capital of California is Sacramento, but I feel like nobody really knows that. So I feel like there's that. Or people just, when they think of America, they think of either New York or Los Angeles, I feel like. So I can definitely relate to the whole like Paris is the only like city within France.
Yeah, that's totally like the media, they focus on like one center and then everybody knows the country for it. Like, I guess I don't really have a problem because everyone portrays New York or something, but there's like so many different types of America, like the states all different. And it's probably in France too, not only Paris.
Yeah, definitely. We'd also like to ask you, can you tell us a little bit more about your language learning journey? Because I noticed that you're learning a lot of different languages. Because usually, like some people are, if they're interested in Asian languages, they learn a set number of Asian languages, but you're learning like languages from all over the world. So can you tell us a little bit more about like how you got started with language learning and your language learning journey?
In school, you have to. So I started learning English in elementary school, but we just learned the colors, how to count, and the alphabet. And then in middle school, you start learning about conjugation, grammar, more vocabulary, and all this stuff. And so when I started middle school, so in sixth grade, I was in a private school, and they offer a lot of people to start another language. So I had the choice between Italian, German, and Spanish. So I chose Spanish, and there was a lot of clubs too, so I could have studied Chinese and other languages, but I don't remember. So I choose Spanish, and then I moved. So I had to stop Spanish for a year because in other schools all around France, you start your third language. I mean, school system isn't the same, so I never know which class is which. So it's eighth grade. So I started eighth grade again, and it was the same thing because my class was, I mean, they just started to learn Spanish. So I did English since I was in sixth grade and Spanish since eighth grade. I hated English till high school because I was really bad at it, and I never understood this language. But for a summer, I just like started to watch a lot of series, and I had all of the bases because I was in school, and I, even if I didn't want to, I learned it. So I had a base, and yeah, so now I can speak English. I always loved Spanish, so I just learned it, and I was very happy to learn it. I went to Spain 3 times. Once in middle school with my class and some teachers, then with friends, and I went back to study. And I always wanted to learn Russian, but I never did. I could have in high school, but I didn't. I wanted to learn Russian because I don't like to watch a series and have the subtitle. I like to do something else. And I was watching a series, an American series, and a lot of people were speaking Russian, and I wanted to understand that. So that's why I wanted to learn Russian. And then Korean, I just starting to watch K-dramas. At first, I hated Korean too. The first time that I listened to it, and then I just started to love it.
Yeah, that's so cool how you mentioned that like the majority of the languages you learned are based on like different like experiences you've had in your life and how Russian. I think it's so cool how you like got interested in Russian because of watching an American show that has some Russian in it. That's super cool. And then how you learn Korean through K-dramas. That's also really unique. And I feel like a lot of people learn languages nowadays because of interest and because of like entertainment now that the world is becoming a lot more global.
Yeah, and it's like I can relate to like at first not liking a language, but then like slowly liking it because when you study it, when you're in it, then a lot of doors come open. You can communicate with more people and it just opens your mind and actually really changes your mind. Like that's what languages does. And we also have our last question for you for the personal question segment is can you explain to us and the viewers what is your major and why it interests you?
In France, there's two major based on languages. One where you only speak and learn one language, so it can be whatever language you want to, but it's just centered on that language. So you learn about the history of every language, of every country that speaks that language. You learn about all the facts, how it was made, not made, but like how it started, what languages they spoke before that, and you know about and the countries and the regions within this country. And if I choose to do that, I would have choose Russian, but I didn't want to be only on one language. So I chose the other one where I could have spoke a lot of languages. So I study English, Spanish, and Russian. And there's option classes when you can learn another language for one semester. So there's Italian, German, Chinese. I don't know what language it is. Maybe it's Mandarin. Arab, I think, but I'm not sure.
Arabic.
Yeah, Arabic. And so yeah, for the moment I didn't. I don't know what language I will be studying again in September, but yeah, so that's why I choose this major. And I like the fact that it's not only centered on the language, it's also on the history. So yeah, like the other major, you study the history about um, the countries that speak this language. So I studied U.S. history, Canadian history, and a little bit of South African history. I studied Spain history and the UK too, and a bit of Latin America. But I also like the fact that you don't only learn the language and the history, you also learn vocabulary and other stuff around languages. So the culture, why sometimes you use one word and not the other, and just like the vocabulary around a lot of things. So it can be economy. In my major, we also have law.
Law.
Oh.
Derecho.
So we also study that and other stuff. And I like the fact that it's something that we will be using next when we finish or after our major in the work environment. So I think it just makes something that I like. I'm super happy to study that. So yeah.
It sounds like a really cool major, and I like how you went into detail about like all about. I can totally relate to not just wanting to focus on one language, even though you might be like more interested in Russian. You still are very interested in other languages, and of course, you don't want to lose them. So you decided to opt for a major that's better at allowing you to learn more languages and learn about different cultures. which is really interesting. And can we just take a moment and appreciate your English? I know like you probably get this like a lot, but it's like really surprising knowing that you started learning English in 6th grade and your English is really great. And it's really cool that you're coming on this podcast and speaking entirely in English. That's really admirable.
Thank
Yeah, so now that's pretty much it for our personal questions we have for you. So we wanted to talk about the topic of today's podcast episode, which is intercultural communication and cultural differences. When you messaged me talking about what you wanted to talk about on the podcast. This is really interesting. We never really talked about this before, went into depth about cultural differences, but I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that language learning and cultures are intertwined, and that you can't simply learn a language and then just expect to ignore the culture that surrounds it and the culture that is within it. So, for instance, greetings differ depending on the country of origin. So, in certain Asian countries, people greet and show respect by bowing their heads. In the US, people usually greet each other by shaking hands or by hugging. And in certain South American countries, people greet each other with a kiss on the cheek. Is there any special way that people greet each other in France that you can think of that might be similar or different to the ways that I mentioned?
Oh, so in French, we kiss on the cheek. When I came back from studying in Spain, there was a lot of Americans. So I started to hug people. And then when I came back in France, I wanted to hug people. And people were like, no, don't hug me. Like, what is this? Because you only hug people that you love. So
Yeah, like
maybe,
close with.
yeah, so a boyfriend or a friend, but that can just hug you.
Mhm.
So it's just like something that you establish with people before,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
can't just like hug people like that.
And also in different countries, they have like different greetings. Like for example, China, they say "你吃饭了吗?" It means
That's
like "Have you eaten?" Like, but us Americans thinking that it's just like, "Oh, you want to invite me out to lunch?" But it's just that's how they start their greeting. It's like a good morning for them, and
That's so
many people,
true. Oh, sorry.
yeah. And many people ask, like, why is it important to learn about your target language's culture? So, when you're learning language, it's not only just about speaking it, because learning the other's culture, it's a sign of respect and it gives you a different view of the world. It may give you different perspective on things that make you step out of your original mindset of your native culture and the environment that you're used to grow up in. It may allow you to break and overcome certain stereotypes you may have had about the culture. And it will also allow you to get more acquainted with different cultures and people. And it might even result in you enabling to actually handle the culture shocks that you may encounter while living in different countries.
Yeah, and experiencing different cultures. Yeah, I really like the point where you made earlier about like just understanding the importance of like just like taking that step and willingness to understand like other cultures, because like when you go to another country, it might be normal to, like we're talking about greetings earlier, and in America usually we greet each other with like, oh, how are you doing today, and everyone responds with, oh, I'm doing great, like I'm fine, thank you. And it's usually like pretty brief and stuff like that. But if you go to different countries, they have obviously different greetings, and just understanding and being patient, I think, is super helpful and super important in terms of like having better intercultural communication and breaking stereotypes like you mentioned before. So right now we just wanted to talk about our different personal stories with cultural differences. Like for instance, was there a time where you were in a different atmosphere or certain things that people were doing that are conventional in the context of one culture, but are seen as strange or like unconventional or shocking in another culture? So do any of you guys have experience with culture shock? Clara, you might want to talk about your time in Spain, or Lily in China, or wherever you guys went.
Yeah. So there's two things. So first, so we're talking about how we greet people. One thing that I saw is that when I was in Spain, so as I said, there was a lot of Americans, And each time that I saw someone, even if I saw them before, they were saying hi. And I was like, why are you saying hi? We already saw each other earlier. It's like, we don't need to say that. You can just smile or just like pass by and it will be okay. And so yeah, I learned about that it was a thing in America to say hi every time that you see a person, which was really weird for me. And another time I was at the cafeteria and we were eating spaghetti. And so I put ketchup on my pasta and mayonnaise.
Mayonnaise.
And yeah. And so I'm the only one that puts mayonnaise on my pasta because I'm not a big fan of ketchup. But everybody was looking at me weird because I just put ketchup on my pasta, and we had a big debate about that, like if it was normal or not to put ketchup on your pasta. So yeah, it was fun.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I never really thought of putting like ketchup on pasta, so that's really interesting.
In French, we don't eat at special times. Maybe maybe for the breakfast, we will eat when we wake up, or like around 8 or 7 before, because you have school or stuff. Then you eat between 12 a.m.
12 p.m.
to for some people 2 p.m. And then you have snack time between 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Then you have the apéro, which is a typical French thing. It's like a kind of buffet with a lot of small things, kind of cheese, charcuterie, which is meat. You can have like it's just snacks, but with wine and other people. And then you eat dinner whenever you want to. So if you have children, you will eat earlier, so around 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. But if you're older and you just eat whenever you want to, so sometimes people eat around 8, but can just go until 10 p.m.
I feel like it's very similar to the States with breakfast and lunch. Like you usually eat breakfast like whenever you wake up, whether that's like 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., whatever. And then usually we eat lunch at around like anytime from like 11 to 1 or 2, I think.
Yeah.
And then as for, I feel like dinner is tricky because I don't know. Like people eat at different times. Sometimes I would say like probably the earliest is like 5 p.m. But anywhere from like 5 p.m. to maybe 8 p.m. I think.
Yeah,
is when most Americans usually eat dinner. I don't know. Like people call like midnight snacks if you eat at like 11 p.m. or like 12 a.m.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, that's super interesting how it depends on like where you grew up and where you're from, like how much or what time of the day you eat. You also mentioned that you went you lived near the border of Switzerland. Is that correct?
Yeah, I used to.
Yeah, so were there times there where you were also experiencing cultural differences, maybe like different from Spain or different from France, or any experiences that you want to share?
I don't know if it's really a shock, a different cultural shock. You say Swiss people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they are very punctual, so you can't be late. And they have a different money from Europe. And so it's very, very expensive. And when you live at the border, you have to make the change every time. So like you change your money, your currency. And so one time we just like gave a $20, not $20, but 20 euro bill, and 40 euros. and I used 20, but I didn't use the other 20. And so I was expecting to have my 20 back, but they gave me like 15 euros because like there was the different
Like conversion?
yeah.
Oh, I see.
So I was like, I was pissed at this time, but I understood. And yeah, so there's a lot of things like that. Like Swiss people, they just come to France to grocery shopping, to do grocery shopping, because it's just cheaper and you have more stuff. It's not the same school system, so sometimes like you saw people and you didn't know in which grade they were. Like people came to the doctor in France or to do the gas. I mean, like to put gas in your car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just like how you can beneficiate from another country is just right next to yours, and just take what's better in which country. I'd like to say that I had friends that came, so friends that I made in Spain, but they were Americans, and I brought them to Switzerland. It was just for a few minutes because we were late, but since the border is just like you can cross whenever you want to, there's no control, so they were really shocked. And yeah, because we were in France and the other second one were in Switzerland, so it was really they weren't used to it, because I guess in America you have to show your passport or stuff like that, and it's really long, and so yeah.
Wow, that's like the true example of intercultural communication in real life. Like you brought your American friends from Spain to Switzerland with you, and you're from France. That's so cool. Lily, do you have any personal experiences that you've like had with culture shock or different culture experiences?
Well, like while learning Chinese, like I was actually learning culture at the same time. So a lot of the things like I'm just used to because I've been learning for it. But maybe if I'm thinking back to like when I first learned it, there's this thing like with green hats. Do you know this, Taylor?
No, I don't.
It's so random. But if you give someone a gift like a green hat and then they're in a relationship, that means like you want the couple to break up by that person getting cheated on. So don't give, that's very traditional, but don't give green hats to Chinese people. And also a lot of the things we have in China is like losing face. Like face is very important. So like a lot of people, they're just very like polite or something, like they fight for the bill for like they're fighting for their lives or different things like that. Like, and also China, they really like respect like elders, and they're very nationalistic, which like a lot of Americans, they can like curse out the government, like a lot of them, they're just complaining, but like Chinese people, they're very loyal to their country.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I can definitely relate. I mean, I haven't been to Korea or anything like that, but I think like different cultural differences between Korea and the States are that like there's a whole like I forgot what it was called, but there's like total different systems in Korean for you're learning Korean right now. So like for like respecting your elders and having to use a different system to talk to elders versus talking to like friends. I think that was kind of a big culture shock when I started learning Korean as well, because you have to like adapt your entire mindset and entire way you speak depending on the people that you're talking to. which is interesting to me. Also, I went to Japan a few years ago, and what I thought was pretty interesting was the fact that, like I mentioned, like greetings are different. So a lot of times when you would go to the store or anything like that, people would like bow at us and say thank you, which was different because we don't do that in America. But I found it pretty funny because even now, like it's 2 years after I came back from Japan, and sometimes I just like find myself bowing to people when I say thank you, just like oops. So yeah, that's pretty interesting how we can like pick up things and still remember them as like muscle memory, even after the fact that we've been back from, a different culture, a different country.
Yeah, that's like totally right. And that leads us into our next question, actually. Like, what are some times when you have felt that you've learned something new about yourself or that your perspective changed or was broadened through learning about another culture?
So when I was in Spain, I didn't had like a culture shock, or like the minds are pretty similar. Maybe just like they take a nap between a few hours, and just start like over. In Spain, I was with a lot of people from different countries, so there was a lot of Americans, but my roommates were Italian and Korean. I was the only French. No, there was another French guy, but we weren't the only ones. And so I really had this big cultural thing. So once the mother of my roommate that was Korean came in, so I just knew that I had to bow because she was an elder, and I didn't knew her. So that, which in France we don't do, like we don't bow, but you just like, there are elders, so you don't speak the same way. But there was that, and I don't really know. I know that I was more open-minded, which I thought that I wasn't. That I was already, but I wasn't. It was just the people and the way they were and how they act. There was a lot of LGBT people, like from this community, and in France, we're not like it's not the same how we greet those people. So I didn't had like the same way to interact with them, but we were friends, and so I learned more about this community. I learned more about food and how people cook. So I don't really know what changed because I don't remember, but I just know that I'm more open-minded because I had this experience, and I had the chance to meet people from all over the world. So, yeah.
I really like how you worded that. Like earlier, you said you thought you were open-minded, but you became even more open-minded when you were in another country. Because I feel like a lot of people, like even us included, like sometimes we're like, oh, we're already open-minded. We're already, we already have a global perspective. But it's always good to have another experience. And going abroad, I think, really makes you realize how, like, there's a whole nother world for you to see. There's a whole nother realm for you to explore. And you can always be more open-minded, and you can always, broaden your global perspective. So I think our biggest takeaway is just to be patient and willing to understand other cultures. I think that's definitely the most important thing. So that was it for our section about intercultural communication and cultural differences. And now we want to get started and talk about and answer some questions that we got from Instagram for you. So our first question is from Kelly_Japanese Studies. And she asks, what is something that you love about your culture?
It's a tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough question.
I love the food, but not like gastronomic food, just like the pastries. Like when you go to the bakery, there's just like a lot of choices. So as you know, like croissant and all the stuff. I just love that.
Our next question comes from Ali.May. She says, I want to major in foreign languages in college. What career paths are you planning to pursue with this degree?
So a lot of people in my major don't know what they want to do. Some of them want to be teachers or journalists. There's a lot of things that you can do. You can go to a business school after that. But I'd like to work in at an embassy or maybe at the UN, an organization. I mean the UN because I used to live next to Geneva and it was right next to it. So yeah.
That's so interesting. I really hope you achieve your goals within the next few years, and I think your hard work will definitely pay off. Our last question that we got from Instagram is also from Ali.May, and she asks, how do you consistently study and learn your target languages?
So I learn Russian through school, even though sometimes I just don't want to. I think it's just important to have something that motivates you and that you can always go back to when you don't want to study. So Korean, I just watch K-dramas and I study the vocabulary and the structure of the sentences. And in English, I don't really study English much, maybe just the conjugation because I struggle a bit with that. But I just watch series in Spanish too, the same issue than in English. So I just watch series. But that's just because I have already a good
grasp.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in Russian, for example, I struggle a lot. I struggle to learn the alphabet, to read. So yeah, and to write because it's not the same. So you just need to find what works for you. It can be like reading or listening to music. And for me, it's just watching series because it's just easier. And I haven't found a Russian series that I like for the moment. But you just need to find your thing and then it'll be smooth.
Yeah, so many people have different methods and there's not one right method. Maybe with each language you take different approaches and there's nothing wrong about that. And before we conclude, could you teach us your favorite word or phrase in any of the languages you're learning?
So I think in Korean it will be Kenshana. I don't have a good pronunciation. In Russian, I don't know yet because I don't have that much vocabulary. In Spanish, it will be maybe Madre Mia or No Pasa Nada.
Yeah, and thank you a lot for being here and teaching us these words. And do you want to translate it for our viewers that aren't learning the languages?
So basically, Kenshana and No Pasa Nada, it's the same, I think. Just like it will be okay or don't worry. And Madre Mia, it's I don't know if there's a translation. Just like wow.
Okay. Yeah.
It's what like that.
It's like, oh my gosh, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always really interesting, when there's no direct translation, but there's just that feeling or that similarity between languages, but you can't directly translate everything.
Oh yeah, because if you would translate it literally, Madre mia is like my mom. But if you say that, that sounds so weird. Is that really? Cool.
Yeah. So that about wraps it up for today's podcast episode. Thank you so much for joining us today, Clara. It was really great talking to you and finally getting to meet you for the first time and just learning about your language learning journey. I wish you the best of luck. We wish you the best of luck with, your goals and dreams and aspirations with your major. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. I hope that since it's morning for you, that you have a good day. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Bye, guys.